Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pastor Study. My name is Pastor Jeffrey V. Gunn, Senior Pastor of Second Calvary Baptist Church here in the city of Norfolk, Virginia. I want to thank you for joining us on this exciting study of the last days of the earthly ministry of Jesus. We began by looking at Palm Sunday, and yesterday we took a look at what happened on Monday after Jesus had gone into Jerusalem. Today, we're going to take up what happens on Tuesday. But before we begin that, I just want to remind you or tell you about an exciting 7 Last Words service that's going to take place on March 29th at 12 o'clock p.m. at Second Calvary Baptist Church. Now, that is located at 2940 Corporal Avenue in the city of Norfolk. Second Calvary Baptist Church, 2940 Corporal Avenue in the city of Norfolk. We have been doing this service for 35 years. And so this is the 35th annual service that's hosted by Second Calvary Baptist Church and Philadelphia Fellowship, where Dr. Rhonda D. Joyner is the pastor. We have had some exciting preachers over the years. And so this year is no exception. We think we've got a great lineup of powerful men and women of God. Dr. Veronica Coleman in Virginia Beach, Dr. H. Patrick Kaysen from Chesapeake, Reverend Nicole P. Guns from Second Calvary, Pastor Julian Joyner of Chesapeake, Dr. Bishop Mark Thomas Sr. From Portsmouth, Dr. Charity Fisher from Norfolk, and Reverend Cedric D. Rouson from Chesapeake. We think that if you miss this service, you're going to really miss a great time. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And don't forget, we'll see you on Friday and then on Thursday night at 7 o'clock if you can make it out to the Monday, Thursday service. We'll talk about that on tomorrow. So since we're here in the pastor study, I do want to just introduce you to a couple of books. You know, I'm not the smartest person in the world, and because this is a study, we want to kind of make sure that we are taking a look at different resources. And so I want to. This is entitled "Teach the Text" commentary series. Is the Gospel of Mark. It's by Grant R. Osborne. I believe he's a very reputable scholar. I have appreciated his work over the years, and I may make some reference from him. And then another scholar that I've used extensively is R. Alan Culpepper, whose commentary is published by Smith and Helwey's Bible Commentary, and I will make some references to some of the things that they say in their commentary. So just to kind of make sure that that we're looking at the work of reputable scholars and taking a look at how scholars and biblical teachers have taught about these passages over the years. And so we pick up in verse 20, where Jesus and his disciples are returning from Bethany. They're going back to Jerusalem. They're going back to Jerusalem from Bethany. It's in the morning. We don't know what time of the morning it is because it doesn't say. But they're going back to Jerusalem. And verse 20 says, as they were passing by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots up. Now remember, on Monday, Jesus looked for figs on this tree. He didn't find any, and so he cursed the fig tree. And many scholars have believed that this is a reference to or a reminder of the need for the people of God to be fruit bearers. That's one of the ways that it has been interpreted. And let me just point this out. We'll look at what Grant Osborne says about that. And he says, in this, he says, Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered. And Grant Osborne says the fig tree was an image often used to depict Israel and its fruitfulness for God. And primarily he quotes a verse, Jeremiah chapter 24, verses 1 through 10, Hosea chapter 9, verse 10, and Nahum chapter 3, verse 12. And the idea of a barren fig tree would symbolize Israel's fruitless failure. And that's something you see in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 11. Let's look at that. Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 11. Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 11. If you have a Bible, you can just pull it out. I'm sorry, verse 13. Verse 13. Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 13. And it says, I will surely snatch them away, declares the Lord. There will be no grapes on the vine and no figs on the fig tree, and the leaf will wither, and what I have given them will pass away. Why are you still sitting? Assemble yourselves and let us go into the fortified city. And so here we remember now, during the time of Jeremiah, the Lord had gotten completely fed up with them because of their faithlessness and their fruitlessness. And so when Jesus curses this fig tree, it is representative of Israel's failure to bear the kind of fruit that the Lord God had wanted them to. And so Grant Osborne goes on to say, and he goes on to say this, and he says, the fig tree was symbolized Israel's fruitless failures. Jeremiah 8:13, Micah 7:1, and the necessity of divine judgment that would come upon them. So this was a natural image for Jesus to use to depict God's judgment and the forthcoming destruction of the temple and the land, as well as judgment upon a faithless people. Now, this statement then about the coming judgment of Jerusalem and Israel would come in AD 70 or 70 of the Common Era, when the Romans again destroyed Jerusalem and tore down the walls of the temple and literally scattered the people away from Jerusalem. Josephus talks about that in his work. Now let's go back to Mark chapter 11. And so this fig tree then reminded them of the fact that that God required more than just talk. We are often reminded that the church and believers are to bear fruit. And what is that fruit? It is to be producers of new disciples. Now, so being reminded, Peter said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you curse has withered. And Jesus answered, saying to them, have faith in God. Now, this is a rather interesting statement. Have faith in God. Now, is he saying have faith in God that you can curse fig trees, or you can say to fig trees that you are no longer going to bear fruit? Or let's say you go out and you see an apple tree and you say, well, there are no apples on this tree, so I'm going to curse this tree. And then you look up the next day and the tree is the same. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying that we should have faith in the one who is able to produce things that are impossible. And he follows this up in verse 23. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says is going to happen, it will be granted to him. Wow, what a powerful statement that is. Jesus is talking about faith. And what he's saying is that sometimes when we run into enormous challenges or huge obstacles or tremendous opposition, that if we pray and we ask God and we believe. See, here he gives the command, have faith in God. That's an imperative command. He says, have faith in God. And then he says, if you believe, if you have faith in God, that you can move this mountain. And so that suggests to me that they were probably on the Mount of Olives. They were probably on the Mount of Olives when Jesus made this statement. And so he says to them, have faith in God. And then truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, does not doubt in his heart, but believes that which he says is going to happen, it will happen or be granted to you. Now, I guess the question is, how do you understand this? What does that mean? Does it mean that I can ask God to give me the winning numbers for the lottery? Does it mean that? No, I don't think so. Does it mean that I can ask God to give me $1 million mansion? I mean, I believe I have faith. Does it mean that? No, I don't think it means that either. Does it mean that I can ask God for a uh, a wealthy family? Does it mean that? No, I don't think it means that. I think that what this means and what Mark intends and what Mark intended for us to remember is that when it comes to the work of God, that the things that we think are impossible can be possible when we have faith, we don't doubt, and we believe. That's what I think it means. That's my interpretation of that. That's how I think of that. And so there are different interpretations of that, and people have thought about it in a lot of different ways. I think that what I have said makes a lot of sense. And I can read you what Grant Osborne thinks about this. He says, this strong proverbial saying of faith that can move mountains could refer to one, the Mount of Olives on which they were standing, and which carried apocalyptic symbolism from Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4, or the Temple Mount, which would be Jesus' prediction of the destruction that would come upon them. And I did mention that to you about ultimately the destruction of Jerusalem. And he goes on and he says, so much failure on the part of the disciples has taken place due to a lack of faith. And remember, Jesus is reminding them that as they prepare, and they're not even thinking about this, but there's going to come a day when they will need to be prepared and they will need to have great faith. And Jesus goes on to say in verse 24, therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you can receive them and they will be granted to you. Whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you your transgression. And so Jesus continues on after talking about faith by reminding his disciples about forgiveness, and that as you pray, you should seek forgiveness, and anything that you ask in the name of God, the Father in heaven, he will do. And you will also be forgiven of your transgressions. Now, verse 26, and you may have a Bible that may have verse 26 in brackets or parentheses. It just simply means that this verse was not necessarily found in some of the earlier manuscripts. But verse 26 says, but if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your transgressions. So I'll have a conversation with you about Bible manuscripts at another point, and we'll talk about how the Bible came to be and why it's important to study various different English versions of the Bible and different English translations so as to get the most accurate rendering of the text. Now, so Jesus then, they go into Jerusalem. They've come down the mountainside. Jesus has taught 2 lessons with them, or rather, he's taught 3. He's taught them about faith. He's taught them about prayer, and he's taught them about forgiveness. So faith in God, faith in the power of God, faith in the power of God to do the impossible. And he's taught about prayer, and the disciples being people of prayer, and then he's taught about forgiveness. Now, all of these are lessons. All of these are lessons that are intended to be applied to us today. So, what do you mean, Pastor? Well, what I mean is this: that when it comes to the work of ministry, when it comes to the work of the church, when it comes to the work of the ministry, we can do great things when the people of God believe. That's the lesson that Jesus wants us to get, that we can do great things when we believe in the power of God, that we can convert cities, we can do impossible things, we can do things that we don't think we can do when we believe in the power of God. Then he teaches about prayer and about the power of prayer, that whatever you ask the Father and you believe, you can receive it. That's a powerful thing. You know, great things happen in churches when churches and congregations pray. We have a prayer ministry in the church every day, 7 days a week, 365 days every year. There are people praying in the church. And a lot of churches have prayer ministries or prayer lines or prayer Zoom calls that they do either every day or every week. We pray twice a day, 7 and at 10. So we invite you to join us and if you want to know more about it, you can go to our church website, secondcalvary.org, secondcalvary.org, and get information about that. Now, so let's go on. Verse 27, I'll read verses 27 through 33. They came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, all right, and began saying to him, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do these things? And Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question, and you answer me, and then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? And Jesus says, answer me. He challenges them to answer him. They began reasoning among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, then why did you not believe him? But shall we say from men, they were afraid of the prophet? For everyone considered John to have been a real prophet. Answering Jesus, they said, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, nor will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Now, so let's look at those verses. Verses 27 through 33. It tells us clearly that Jesus came again to Jerusalem. Now, the last episode or the last passage dealt with Jesus teaching his disciples. He's teaching his disciples, and they're coming into Jerusalem and coming down the Mount of Olives. And so Jesus is teaching his disciples. So more than likely, they were on the Mount of Olives coming down, and he taught them three things. And then he comes into Jerusalem. Now, this is Tuesday. He comes into Jerusalem. He comes into Jerusalem. He walks around the temple complex. Now, remember, we said that we showed you pictures. The temple complex was not a building. It was a large platform that had that covered about 35 football fields someplace. Some say it's more than likely about 35 acres. 35 acres. That was a large place. And I've been there. I tell you, I've been there, and it is a massive complex. Even today, that mound, that Temple Mount is still there, and it's a massive place. So Jesus comes. He's walking around in the temple complex, and he's met by the chief priests. Now, not one. Now, remember, during the time of Moses, there was only one chief priest. That was Aaron. So here, there are two chief priests. Some believe that it was Annas and Caiaphas, who were the chief priests. And the scribes and the elders came to him. So who were the scribes? The scribes were the lawyers. They were the persons who were skilled in the law. They were steeped in the law, and the elders were probably senior members of the community, probably senior members of the temple, maybe senior members of the Sanhedrin, but they were elders, and they all came to Jesus. So evidently, Jesus had gathered around him a crowd of people. He's talking, and so the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, they see all of this commotion. They go over to Jesus, and they begin asking him, by what authority are you doing these things? And so we don't know what things there were, but obviously we can assume that it was the teaching, and Jesus may have even healed someone. We have no record of that, but he may have even maybe healed someone. But the Jesus was probably talking and gathering, and people were coming around him because they already knew that he was very popular. And so Jesus says to them, he answers their question with a question. And that question was, he says to them, was the baptism of John, verse 30, from heaven or from men? Answer me. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? Now, let's just talk about John the Baptist. The Gospels, the Gospels, and in the writings of Josephus and others, John the Baptist was probably, some people have said that he was probably more popular in Israel than Jesus. Well, because his ministry was in Judea, and John was baptizing by Jordan, beyond the Jordan, and Bethany beyond the Jordan is where John baptized, and that was down near Jericho. And in that area, there were people called Essenes, and some people believe that John was a member of the Essene community. But John drew a large crowds of people, and they weren't just average common folk. They were people who were soldiers. There were religious leaders who came, and they were all baptized by John for the repentance of sins. And so John had a very large following of people. And so Jesus then says to them, was John's baptism from heaven or was it from men? And that reference to men is an indication that there were people who were self-promoting and who were engaged in religious activities just as there are people today. And so as they think about it, they say to themselves, if we say from heaven, he will say, why did you not believe him? If John was considered to be a man sent by God from heaven, why didn't you believe him? Because many of the people of that day thought of John as a prophet. They thought of John the Baptist as a prophet. And even Jesus himself said there was none greater than John. I mean, John the Baptist was perhaps one of the most prolific preachers of that day. And there is probably some evidence that John's reputation was bigger and stronger than Jesus. Now, I know you're probably going to say, how can you say that? I know that's what you're saying. I know that's what you're saying, but it is true. It is definitely true. Now, remember, John was located down in Judea. Jesus was up in the north in Galilee. Small towns, villages, fishing villages, farming villages. John the Baptist was down near Judea. He was in Judea. He was near Jerusalem. And so he had a very powerful platform. And so at any rate, let's go on. And we're almost done. Because the people considered him to be a real prophet. And so when they say to Jesus, we don't know whether his baptism was from heaven or from men. So we don't know. And so Jesus then says to them, then neither will I tell you by what authority I do what I'm doing. That was one of there's so many things in this passage that speak to us. Let me just kind of close this out by taking a look at some of the things that Grant Osborne says. And he makes mention of the fact that Jesus requires us, and we should walk in the authority that we have been given by God. And so as you and I think about this, and as we think about what we are called to do, my mother used to always say to me, son, you should preach as though as the Lord is standing behind you. And so the things that we do in ministry, we should do because we have the divine authority of God to do these things. And so I want to encourage you today to really be focused on using what God has given you to do the work that He's called you to. And so what do we learn today? Jesus teaches us about faith. He teaches us about prayer. He teaches us about forgiveness. And then he teaches us about authority, about not being intimidated by people who would want to raise questions about the authority that God has given us. And so the text doesn't tell us that Jesus went back to Bethany because Mark 12 goes on and makes some other assumptions that Jesus engages in parables and other teachings. And so we're going to pick up tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday. And so we'll pick up tomorrow with the other lesson and what we think happened on Wednesday. All right. So I hope that you've been blessed by the day. If you have, reach out to me at info@secondcalvary.org, info@secondcalvary.org. Just want to remind you about the 7 last words of Jesus on Good Friday here at Second Calvary Baptist Church at 12 noon. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining with us. Hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.